Hi there, in this video we're going to show you how to stitch out the quilted blocks. The blocks that you see here right now, these are blocks A4, A7, H4, and H7, and this is just one of the versions of the quilted block. Another version of the quilted block is this side of it will also be stitched on that, so it's just an additional quilted block that flows nicely through the Charmed Adventure quilt. These are just two different color versions. We're going to actually make another color version of it, and I'm going to stitch a 5-inch block for you today. Items that you're going to need to stitch it out is you're going to have to hoop your battleizer in your hoop. If you want an extra dimension and texture to your quilt, you can do the optional step 2, which is add a layer of wool batting. And we've prepared the wool batting by pressing the edges just a little bit, and that's to accommodate for the loft of that. And it will do a zigzag stitch on your machine to attach it to the battleizer. One of the things you might want to do in this step is to raise your presser foot in the highest position possible, and we'll show you all that while we stitch it out. Other things that you will need is you will need your fabric 1, and I've gone crazy today and picked a real cute little zigzag pattern, which is totally opposite of what I've done on the other 2 samples that I showed you in the beginning of the video. But the instructions show you what size to cut your square and to then cut it on the diagonal, and you will be using both of these pieces for this block. You will also need a fabric 2, and I've decided to use the pink. And so you just cut a strip the width of the fabric. WOF initials on your instructions mean width of fabric. And you will also need a backing fabric, and you can use a solid backing fabric. I don't mean solid print, but a solid piece of fabric. Or, in this case, we are going to use a piece backing for this video to show you how to do that. In your organization folder in month 1, you'll find information in a document that shows how to do the piece backing if you want to, and it gives you all the details on how to stitch this together to make your half square triangle and what the final layout is on the quilt and your fabric requirements. Everything you need to know to do that is in that document. So let's head over to the machine and we'll stitch our quilted block. Okay, I have my hoop on the machine with my battleizer in the hoop, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a neutral thread, and or you can use a water soluble thread, and I have embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and we're going to stitch basically a footprint or an outline or placement stitch of where the wool batting will go. Alright, and as I said before, if you want extra dimension, you're going to use your wool batting layer. And this is step 2. It's an optional step, and I'm going to change my thread to a water soluble thread just to avoid all that bulk inside your block, and then we will sew the zigzag to attach the wool batting on. Alright, so we have our wool batting laid right inside that placement stitch, and with water soluble thread we're tacking it to the battleizer. Step 3 will do placement stitches for your fabric. It'll sew the pattern onto the wool. Again, if you didn't do the wool, you would just do this step right onto the battleizer. Since I have the wool on here, again, it's good to have your presser foot set in the highest position your machine will allow it, or at least higher than what the default setting is, because of the loft of this. Another tip I'm going to show you is as it's stitching over the wool, be careful, but kind of push the wool down as it stitches, and that'll keep that wool from getting caught in your foot. And then step 4 is we are going to take our fabric 2 and we're going to lay it right side up over the center section. Make sure you extend the two corner sections. I have a little selvage here, so I'm going to extend it a little bit more past the corner. Just kind of peek under it and have it centered so it's about 1/4 of an inch on both sides of it. And then it'll sew a tack down stitch, still using the water soluble thread. At this point, you can cut the rest of this fabric strip off, leaving 1/4 to 1/2 an inch in the corner. For step 5, I have placed my neutral thread in the needle only, and I'm going to take my fabric 1, lay it right side down, raw edges even with the first piece of fabric, and the machine will sew a seam. And now I'm going to flip my fabric right side up, do a finger press, I'll switch to water soluble thread, and I will do a tack down stitch. I'm ready for step 7, and that would be to place thread E in the needle only, and it will stitch the hunter star corners. Okay, my thread cutter is off, by the way. If your thread cutter is on, it will most likely trim those stitches. But as you'll see, once we add the back, it's time to turn that off. I just kind of leave mine off all the time, and I've gotten used to that. For step 8, you're going to take your fabric 1, and you're just like at the bottom section, you're going to lay it right sides down with your raw edges even, and the machine will sew a seam. And then we'll switch to water soluble thread so that we can tack this down. We use water soluble thread anytime we get to the outside edge of the block. And that is so after you sew all your blocks together that you won't have any stitches or anything to pick out. Okay, before we tack down that corner with the water soluble thread, step number 9 is also not just the tack down, but it is also adding your backing fabric. And as I said in the beginning, you can choose to use a solid piece, but in order to show you how to do the backing that's been pieced, the half square triangles, for this block we're going to use a half square triangle piece. The easiest way to tell you to do that would be to refer to your instructions that show you your fabric 1 and your fabric 2. And lay your fabric 1 and your fabric 2 exactly in the same orientation, and that is exactly how it will go on the back of your block. So that gets laid right there. The other thing you're going to have to take a look at when you're placing this is that, and hopefully you can see it, is that here's the corner of our block and here's our seam line. You're going to want that seam line to line up perfectly with the corner of that block, and you're going to want to do the same with it up here on this side. So let me get that lined up. That one's lined up, and this one is lined up perfectly. So now the next trick is to turn it upside down and get it to your machine without having it move or anything like that. So we recommend a KK2000 or a 505 spray, some type of temporary spray adhesive. Generally, what we tell you to do is to spray this over your trash can or inside a box, because you don't want your hoops or anything to get sticky. So let me do that real quick. And again, I'm going to place it so that each corner lines perfectly up with the seam line on our backing. And you might take a little picking it up and putting it back down. When you get it placed exactly like it needs to be, double check both sides. It wouldn't hurt to just a gentle squirt, just to hold everything in place so it doesn't come off once you put it back on the machine. All Alright, so now I have my water-soluble thread and the needle, and I'm going to go ahead and sew the backing on. And we'll base the backing onto the back of your block, turn it back over, give it a little press to keep that on there, and don't forget to finger press this other side. And let's put it on the machine and we will sew that basting stitch on. Alright, I have my hoop back on the machine. I'm just going to peek under there and everything seems to be in the correct place. Again, smooth out that fabric, your number 1 fabric on the top, and water soluble thread in the needle, and it's going to do a basting stitch. That'll hold the backing on, as well as tack down the fabric one on the front top. Alright, let's take it off and just take a quick look at the back. See how that turned out. And it looks pretty good. Okay, step 10 requires that we put thread B in the needle and also in the bobbin. So I have a freshly wound bobbin of thread B. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put the hoop back on the machine. And it's going to do some quilting. Since we have our backing fabric on, anytime when you do a Hoop Sisters block, after your backing fabric is added, you must match your bobbin to your needle thread. In order for the stitches to look pretty on the back, we recommend that you turn your thread cutter off and also bring your bobbin thread to the top of the hoop and before you begin stitching. And those are tips that you can use and take to the bank that will make a much prettier looking back. So we're going to start our quilting, and then after it takes a couple steps, I'm going to go ahead and cut my jump threads, or my thread tails, excuse me. Okay, for step 11, I have thread A in the needle and the bobbin, and we are going to bring that thread to the top, and we're going to sew some quilting. On the A4, A7, H4, H7 block, it has that little accent thread in this section here on the block. I've chosen a gold thread, so I'm going to bring my bobbin thread to the top and begin stitching that. Stop the machine and trim the thread tails with my Hoop Scissors Mini. And this is the last step for this particular quilted block. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if there's any trimming instruction you need, you can refer to your instructions. We also have a joining and sashing video DVD that is available and that your dealer also has, and they can play that in your class. So we really appreciate you doing our Charmed Adventure quilt, and I hope you find the videos helpful. You have a great day. Thank you. And there's our little jewel, front, and also the back.